You know, after cranking for a while, I knew I needed to get back to kind of, doing the things I had came there for. And that was to spend some time flipping a jig, making some content on the new SPRO CJ Flip jig. This is a great looking jig designed by Johnston. It's got a great lively action skirt. The weed guard on it is perfectly set up to where you're not having to trim anything. I really like the head and the way it's designed with the way the hook lays in there to be able to work up north where you're catching smallmouth or you're flipping big largemouth down south. And I hadn't really spent a lot of time flipping this jig. I have caught a lot of fish up Fayette in the reeds, and I was a little bit disappointed as I was running around looking. There wasn't as much water on those reeds as there normally is. I kind of felt like, man, there's going to be a few places I can catch them, and I started flipping that jig, and that's one of my favorite ways to catch fish.
I feel like every flip you should get a bite when you're doing this. It should be a bass on every one of these. Sometimes though, the water can get so high, these fish get back behind all these cattails and they'll spawn in there, and you'll even see on somebody's water where people will pull their boat up on top of it to get back in there and really pick some of this stuff apart when they're spawning. And there should be, 60-something degrees, you would think there could be some spawning when you can find cattails like this. Oh, golly, that's a good one. Come here. There we go. That's what I like about flipping right there. That's an old big one. I've taken that jig and was just kind of swimming it through the top of those reeds right there, and that big old tank just come up and swallowed it right out of the top of those. And I mean, my comments were bigging right away. That was a good one.
You know, flipping and pitching for me, it kind of probably goes back to my youth and fishing in Oklahoma, where we spent a lot of time in the dirt flipping bushes and laydowns and things along those lines. And I could just do it for hours just to get 5 bites. Now, I gotta say I get a little more antsy nowadays, and I probably want to do things faster, but when I can get a bite flipping in short line, whether I'm using braided line or fluorocarbon, it just, man, when you see that line jump or you feel it and you crank back and you feel one tugging, it is an awesome fight.
I always thought the jig gets a lot more big bites, bigger, bulkier profile than say a Texas rig does in the same situation. And I keep them pretty honest when I'm flipping this kind of stuff. I have them both rigged up a lot of times, but when they're on the jig, it's, just the way it's designed, I think your hookup ratio is really good. You can kind of swim it a little bit more through this type of a cover, especially, and generate some reaction bites as they come across it. And the line tie on this particular bait is set up in a situation that kind of allows you to get a really good fall and get it through some of this cover. And that's always been a popular thing when you look at jigs. It's kind of an archy style jig head, and they just really, the jig doesn't, and all these craziness of people fishing offshore now a lot more, the jig has kind of become a forgotten technique a lot of times in shallow water, and it is still as deadly, and the big ones still bite it just as good. Another fish that came with the jig kind of hanging out over the reeds the way he was right there. What a cool bite. That never gets old, especially when you hook them right like that. They eat your jig like that. Thump, thump. I love that bite. One of my favorites, and always will be.
When you're reading the water and reading conditions, you get a calm day and the cattails aren't moving, water temperature 60 degrees, they should be in those reeds, either spawning or setting up to it, feeding, and you're kind of going around flipping and pitching a jig or a soft plastic Texas rig. It's an exciting bite. I've had days where I've had 20, 25 flipping bites, and I've had days where I've had half a dozen, but when I get a bite flipping and pitching, it's an awesome feeling.
Come here, big guy. Boy, these fish are fat, chunky in this cover.